Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is vex. And this verb was suggested by the viewer, Luis. Luis, thank you so much for this suggestion. This is another verb that includes a letter X. And recently we discussed how this letter X can be pronounced two different ways. So before we take a look at our definition, I'm just going to stress that as I'm pronouncing the letter X here, I'm going to be making a K and an S sound together. Hopefully you can hear it when I say it. Vex. Vex. Now that we can all pronounce this word really well, let's review some of the definitions or ways that we can use this verb. The first way you might encounter the verb vex means to make someone feel annoyed, frustrated, or worried, especially with minor matters. So here we're really talking about the little things that might cause you frustration during the day or cause you to feel a bit annoyed. Maybe it's the way someone's speaking or certain little behaviors. We're not talking about major things, right? War, famine, right? Those aren't minor, those are big issues. But again, the idea here is another word that gets used sometimes, trivial. So again, small things. A second way you might encounter this verb vex could mean to baffle, perplex, or puzzle. Here with this definition, we're talking about not being able to find an answer or maybe find a solution to some type of problem, but it's continually being thought about. Someone is trying to address, maybe trying to fix something, but it perpetuates or goes on. A third way you could use the verb vex can mean to bring trouble, distress, or agitation to someone. Included in this might be physical distress. So you might find examples of headaches, backaches, or other sort of pains vexing a person, causing them that physical pain. And other things, these are not necessarily minor in the third definition. For now, you should know that vex is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all I need to do is add ing, and that forms vexing. The past tense and the participle form of our verb can be made by adding ed. Now, we said this verb ends with the letter X, but the ending sound is an S sound. This means when I add the ed ending, I'm going to make a T sound, but I'm not going to add an extra syllable when I say it. So the past tense and the participle form of our verb sound like this. Vexed, vexed. Okay. Now, if you're a regular watcher, I have a feeling some of you might be asking, hey, wait a minute, you talk about when we see consonant patterns about doubling the ending consonant. We're not doing that here. We just do not double X when we're adding suffixes that begin with vowel letters in English. So in case you're wondering, we are following kind of our basic rules here. Now, normally I would talk about phrasal verbs, but we really don't have any that we need to study. So instead, we'll move on to our verb tense practice. Today, we're going to review the past perfect and the present perfect. Let's start with the past perfect. We use this verb tense to talk about actions that were completed in the past, usually at a known point. But what makes it different than just the simple past tense is that we're stressing that this action occurred before another action or before a certain point. So our past perfect tense helps our listeners or our readers understand the sequence of events. The nice thing about making sentences in the past perfect is that our structure will stay the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, we're going to start with our subject. We'll use the past form of have which is had, and then we'll use the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example sentence. The problem had vexed mathematicians for decades before Daniel Spielman helped solve it. So here we're going back to that second definition. There's a very complex mathematical problem that people had been trying to solve, and they just could not work up to an answer until this particular person helped figure out the answer to the question. Now let's move on and look at negative past perfect sentences. Again, our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. We start with our subject, we use had not, and then the participle form of our verb. You might also see the contraction hadn't here. An example of this. The slow service at the diner hadn't vexed me before today. So this might be someone talking about those little annoyances. So our first definition here, saying like it hadn't bothered me previously. And I would imagine the next sentence or sentences might explain why it was frustrating today. Finally, if you want to make a yes or no question in the past perfect, you want to start with had, then you'll have your subject, and then the participle form of the verb. Here's the last past perfect example. Had persistent abdominal swelling vexed his doctors. Now, I know we talked about physical distress being one way to use this verb, but here I think we're actually going back to our second definition. We're wondering if this symptom or this condition puzzled the doctors. Were they confused and maybe not able to figure out what was causing it or what the underlying problem may have been? Finally, we'll take a look now at the present perfect. We can use this verb tense in a couple different ways. We can use it to describe actions that started in the past and continue into the present. We can also use it to describe an action that occurred at some unknown point in the past. This is frequently called the indefinite past tense. Now, in the present perfect, we need to pay attention to our subject, and that's because we'll be using a present form of have. That means if our subject is I, you, we, or they, we'll use have and then the participle form of the verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, we'll use has and then the participle form of the verb. Let's take a look at an example. Odd-sized packages and cumbersome returns have vexed shipping companies for years. Oh, this might be, again, back to that definition of kind of puzzling, sort of how do we get these things from point A to point B efficiently or in a way that's going to allow us to make more money. That's likely the usage in this sentence. Now let's take a look at a negative present perfect sentence. Again, we need to pay attention to our subject. We'll use either have or has, whichever form matches that subject, followed by not, and then the participle form of our verb. You may also encounter contractions. So have not becomes haven't, has not becomes hasn't. You can see that in my example here. Her behavior hasn't vexed me. So this would be like, her behavior hasn't annoyed or frustrated or bothered me in some way. Finally, let's take a look at making a yes or no question in the present perfect. To do this, you want to start with either have or has. Whichever form matches your subject, that subject comes next. Then use the participle form of our verb. Here's the last example. Have grocery prices vexed shoppers recently? Now, some people might take issue with this verb because remember we said that it's usually for small or minor things. And some people might say, you know, my monthly expenses for food are in some cases nearly doubling. So that's not small, that's not minor. But I have seen this verb used to sort of describe that particular question or feeling that some people have in the present. We might be encountering more of that as tariffs go into effect here in the United States. But now let's spend a moment looking at some words that are related to our verb vex. And the first word we'll start with is the noun vexation. This noun can be used in two different ways. It could refer to the state of being annoyed, frustrated, or worried. An example of this might be, he rolled his eyes in vexation. So that sounds like someone who's annoyed, kind of that look. But a second way you could use the noun vexation could be to refer to something that causes annoyance, frustration, or worry. An example of this might be, they discussed their most recent vexations. So they're discussing the things that are annoying them or frustrating or worrying them. One more word for today. It's the adjective vexatious. This adjective generally describes something that's either causing or tending to cause annoyance, frustration, or worry. An example of this, their vexatious questions didn't seem to end. So maybe I'm annoyed by the fact that these questions just continue on and on and on, or maybe their questions are making me feel a bit more anxious or worried. Right? Without more context, it's hard to know, but that's a great example of an adjective describing the noun questions. Again, I want to say a special thank you to Luis because your suggestions and recommendations for verbs never vex me. I thank you all for watching, and I hope you have a great day.